Hello, folks. Academy released this model in 2023. I think it looks very promising. However, I also use a few resin upgrades like the pilot seat, engine turbine fan, and exhaust set from Def Model. The first step is to complete the front landing gear bay. It looks complex but comes together with no issues. After the parts are ready, I paint them in one go, and while the paint dries, I move to the cockpit and spray a layer of primer first. I'm not sure if there is a need for the flat black paint that you see me using now, because I do not see any difference to the primer color. After masking, I spray the gray color and prepare to paint the details. The decals are not bad, but with so many switches and buttons, I think it is easier to hand paint them. A toothpick or fine brush is ideal for the job. My model is going to be standing in the hangar in a switched off mode, so I paint the monitors black. For some details, I still use decals, but only when it is hard to replicate them with paint. The nose section requires a few elements to come together, so before I glue it, I make sure all fit correctly. A large part of the fuselage is cast in one piece, which looks great. However, I had to remove seam lines. It took me some time, as they are surrounded by many details and raised rivets. Luckily, the fit is good, and this way, I can move to the wings assembly. Flaps are tricky to place inside, regardless of the location pins. They seem to stick out a bit too much. Apart from this, the assembly is quick and easy. The rest of the fuselage and tail is also straightforward, and I came to the phase where resin upgrades come into play. Following the instructions provided with the parts, I remove pieces that have to be cut out. To connect resin and plastic, I use CA glue. This is how I add nose weight. Because I replaced some plastic parts with heavier resin, I added more weight than instructed, just to make sure the model will stand on all wheels. These 4 dots are remains of the pave-penny sensor mount that was used in the older versions of the aircraft. To make them look more realistic, I use a needle. Just for the painting phase, I mount the canopy on the masking liquid. This way I can remove it after without issues. A whole model gets a primer put on. Now I'm using a paper pattern to create random stains with various density. I use black and brown paint for more diverse effect, focusing on the parts of the aircraft where I think the paint is more exposed to dirt and stains. White paint I use to highlight panels that may be more faded due to the exposure to the sun. Finally, I outline panel lines with heavily diluted black paint. Now to the final colors. I try to add multiple thin layers to have enough coverage, but not too much, so the pre-shading effect is not entirely covered. Before decals and weathering, I put a few thin coats of gloss varnish. While it is drying, I work on smaller elements, like the gun. It looks good out of the box, but drilling barrels will improve it a bit. It was quick, so next I use brown wash to highlight details on the rockets, targeting pod, pilot seat, etc. Finally, I can start with decals, using a micro set to put them on the model. The nose decals require a precise application. The surface is round, and decals have to be aligned perfectly to look good from every angle. When done, I use microsol to melt the decal and press it so it gets in and around every detail beneath it. I leave it to dry and start landing gear upgrades. At Frist, I built the front landing gear with the parts provided in the kit, but I do not like how it turned out. So I remove the transparent light parts, drill the covers, and add chrome paint. The transparent parts I removed before, I replicate now with the UV nail coat. Additional wires always add to the final effect. Here I use a copper wire and paint it gray. The same wire I use for the main landing legs. I leave part of the white isolation. This way I imitate the parts that hold wires in a real aircraft. And voila! This is not the quickest job ever, but at the end, I think the effect is worth the extra time. The assembly is relatively easy, and once I add it all, I need to check if the nose weight was enough. After unmasking the windshield, I realized I should have painted it yellow. So now I have additional masking to do, but not a big deal. I add few light coats of Tamiya clear yellow, and the issue is solved. I do not want this model to be very dirty, but some delicate weathering I make with washes, oils, and water pencils. Before I started the weathering, I painted the whole model with matte varnish, and now I need to be careful with the wash, as it does not come off that easy from the matte surface. Walking surface decals are too dark in my opinion, so I paint them with a lighter shade of gray. What do you think about it? Let me know in the comments. Sensors on the wings I paint gray and add blue metallic dots so they look more realistic. A drop of clear varnish imitate glass on the sensor. All underwing equipment I dry fit ferts, and later I mount it on CA glue. One pylon on the right wing I leave empty. The targeting pod that is supposed to be there will be carried by the jammer lift truck. This will be added to the scene later in the hangar. The resin seat I hand painted and now fitting it in the cockpit. The small support engine exhaust often makes the engine cover dirty. I replicate it with a highly diluted black paint. Ultra glue gives some time for adjustments, so I use it to mount the canopy, and this way I can position its supporting part at the right angle. Air intake covers I imitate with the blue tack painted red. Edwards remove before flight steel set will be a nice addition. I connect covers with the elastic rigging. Based on the reference picture, I cut the shape of the additional cover from the spare plastic part. Pitot tube cover I made from the masking tape. And that, my friends, would make the model build complete. However, there is more I want to show you. Now I will build a base for this model and a few hangar items so it looks more interesting. Bear with me so you can see the final result. Starting with the wheel chocks, I use part of the sprue B. You see there is a protection for some already removed parts, and its shape fits my needs perfectly. So I cut equal pieces of it and painted them. Now I just connect them with the sewing thread, and this part is done. The second actor of the scene is the jammer lift truck. Video build of this little vehicle you can find on my channel or through the link in the description. Now I'm going to mount the targeting pod on it and add belts to hold it in place for the time of transport. The belts I make from the masking tape that I put through copper wire hooks. I install a second belt as well and paint both with a fine brush. Now it is time to put it all together. I start by arranging the models on the hangar floor. Next, I add hangar walls and secure them all together with transparent holders mounted on the corners. Front wheel guiding line I replicate with the masking tape. I put wheel chocks in place and connect the model to the grounding point in the floor by thin yellow copper wire. That, my friends, is the end. Let me know in the comments what else I can add to the scene. If you like the hangar, you can have your own. Just check the description below this video. As always, you can support me by clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel. Huge thanks to all of you who watched till this point. Stay safe and see you next time. Bye.